Rain hammered against the gabled roof of the abandoned Watterson mansion, each drop a tiny drumbeat in the midnight darkness. Thunder rolled like a distant beast awakening, and lightning split the sky in jagged white lines that revealed the skeletal trees clawing at the windows. Inside that ancient, crumbling house, a single candle flickered in the foyer, its wax melting like tears down the side of an ivory holder. Shadows danced across the peeling wallpaper, forming shapes that whispered of things better left unseen. In the master bedroom, once lavish, now a ruin of stained rugs and rotting drapes, a lone figure crouched over a rusted chest. The candlelight trembled across his gaunt face, hollowed cheeks, haunted eyes that mirrored the storm outside. He opened the chest with the trembling hand, and the hinges groaned as if in protest. Inside lay a battered leather photo album, its cover cracked and warped by age. Wet earth clung to the edges of the chest, as though the box had been dragged through a graveyard before finding its way here. He drew a sharp breath and lifted the album. The pages exhaled with dust, stirring motes into the candle's glow. His fingers traced the outline of the photographs, sepia-toned memories of a family long gone. The first page held a picture of a smiling couple, arms entwined around a pale infant nestled in a cradle of blankets. The faces were kind, almost radiant, but their eyes held a void that sent a shiver crawling down his spine. Something was wrong. Fragments of fear surfaced in the corners of his mind, muttering that those smiles were too wide, those eyes too empty. Outside, the wind rose to a wail, rattling the windows as though pleading for release. The candle guttered, flickered, then steadied. In that moment of fragile calm, a cry split the air, not the innocent wail of a newborn, but a broken sob echoing through the halls. The candle's flame bent toward the chest, as if drawn by an unseen presence, revealing a single line scrawled in ink across the photo album's spine. They took them all. Except me. Silence followed, heavier than the storm itself, and the candle flickered out. Alan's heart pounded in his chest as he carried the photo album down the grand staircase, each step creaking under his weight. The hall was suffused with the red glow of a single emergency lamp, its battery sputtering like a dying heartbeat. He paused before a tall, dusty mirror, his reflection fractured into slivers of pale light. Tentatively, he opened the album to a new page and found the photograph that had drawn him here. Two strangers, faces obscured by shadows, cradling a newborn so tiny he seemed almost ethereal. The infant's eyes were closed, mouth open in a silent wail, but the strangers' smiles were grim and knowing, as though they held secrets meant to remain buried. A draft whispered through the corridor and flicked his hair against his forehead. Alan swallowed against a rising tide of dread. He turned the page again to reveal a second image. The same couple standing in front of the very mansion he now haunted, their silhouettes illuminated by flashbulbs in the darkness. The date scrawled beneath was barely legible, May 17th, 2003. His birth date. His breath hitched. How could they be here before he was born? His fingers trembled as he searched the album for more clues, but found only blank pages tinged with mold. Panic fluttered in his chest. He flipped back to the first photo. That wide-eyed baby. That was him. But his real parents? The photograph offered no names, no warmth, only cold frames that hinted at something monstrous. He pressed a trembling thumb to the image, and for a heartbeat the room felt alive. The air thickened, and he could almost hear the soft lullaby of a mother's hum, warped by distance and time. A low thud echoed upstairs like a heavy footfall on rotting wood. Alan slammed the album shut, heart racing, and shoved it under his arm. He felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, something in the darkness, observing, waiting. Clutching the album, he stepped into the lobby's vast emptiness, the red lamp flickering as thunder rumbled overhead. Each breath he drew felt borrowed, as though he were trespassing in a story not meant for him. He forced himself forward, each footstep echoing like a countdown. Somewhere in this house lay the answers to a nightmare he never dared imagine. But first, he had to survive the shadows that hunted him. Alan emerged from the mansion into the relentless downpour, the rain sluicing over his shoulders like spectral fingers. He clutched the photo album beneath his coat and retraced his steps through the overgrown courtyard, where weeds had hollowed out the cobblestones and vines strangled the wrought iron gates. His boots squelched against the muddy path as he made his way to the narrow alley behind the old Elm Street row houses. Once a quiet shortcut, now a corridor of dripping brick and long-forgotten anxieties. At the far end of the alley, beneath a flickering street lamp, stood Mrs. Hollingsworth, the Watterson family's oldest neighbor. She hovered beneath a threadbare umbrella that barely kept the rain at bay. Her eyes, milky with age, fixed on Alan as he approached. "You shouldn't be here, dear," she rasped, voice quivering like dry leaves. He offered a polite nod and gently asked what she remembered of that night 17 years ago. Mrs. Hollingsworth's gaze drifted upward to the rotting eaves before she spoke, each word spat out like bitter tobacco. "I heard her first. The mother," she whispered. Soft crying like a mourner's lament. It carried down the street, faint as a memory. Her knobby fingers trembled as she lifted the umbrella, revealing mottled skin that gleamed with rain. Then came a low hum, almost joyless. It felt wrong. Alan's pulse thrummed in his ears. He asked if she ever saw anyone carry a baby. She shook her head slowly. "No, but I saw footprints. Large, too large for a man. They led from their front door to the alley, then vanished into the shadows." She paused, her lips twisting into a grimace. And something whispered, not human, a voice that slithered along the walls, calling a name. "Alan." A sudden gust of wind rattled the lamp, and Mrs. Hollingsworth gasped, stumbling backward. Alan reached out, steadying her. "The voice, did it sound like a child?" he pressed. She shook her head, eyes wide. "No child's laughter. It was hollow, hungry." She shivered, pulling her coat tighter. "I never stayed to find out more." As Alan thanked her and turned to leave, the alley fell silent once more, save for the drip of water from the gutter. He paused under the lamp's weak glow, glancing down at the damp leather of the photo album. The whispers in the alley weren't confined to memory. They lingered in every drop of rain and every gust of wind. Somewhere in Elmore's shadows, his true history waited, calling him forward with a voice that belonged to things not meant for the living. Section 4. The Burnt Hospital Records. Alan crept through the soggy grounds toward the hulking silhouette of Elmore General's old annex, its windows blackened from ages of neglect. The once sterile facade was marred by scorch marks, as if someone, or something, had tried to consume the building from within. He slipped through a shattered side door, boots echoing on cracked linoleum, and flicked on a battered flashlight. The beam cut through the thick dust hanging in the stale air like cobwebs of despair. Rows of rusted filing cabinets stood sentinel along the corridor, their drawers warped and half open, revealing glimpses of water-damaged folders and moldy manuals. He exhaled slowly, steeling himself, and knelt before the nearest cabinet labeled M2P. His trembling fingers sifted through the charred remains of folders until he found one still intact. Watterson, Allen. The tab was singed black, edges curled like the wings of a dying moth. Dragging the folder to a nearby desk, he pried it open. Inside lay a smear of brittle parchment, half consumed by flames. What remained was a forensics report dated May 18, 2003, with faint, ink-blotted lines. As he turned the page, the paper cracked under his touch, flaking away to reveal a single line. Subject: exhibits anomalous cellular growth. Recommend immediate containment. His breath caught. Containment. A low growl echoed somewhere deeper in the annex, mechanical, inhuman. Allen swallowed his fear and rifled through the folder until he uncovered another document, partially intact. A hospital intake form listing his name, weight, and a series of diagnostic codes he couldn't decipher. Scribbled in the margin was a hastily drawn symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged line. Beneath it, a note in heavy script: permission revoked. Transport to Lab Delta. A metallic clang resonated from down the hall, and Allen's flashlight beam darted toward the sound. The filing cabinet doors rattled as if pushed by unseen hands. He slammed the folder shut and tucked it under his arm, adrenaline flooding his veins. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he pressed onward, drawn toward the morgue room at the corridor's end. Pushing open the heavy steel door, he entered a vault of cold, antiseptic dread. The refrigeration units stood empty, their interior lights long dead. On a cracked counter lay a single metal file box, its lid ajar and rust nibbling at the edges. He knelt and peered inside, vials of dried blood, each labeled with initials and dates. One vial caught his eye, smudged ink reading AW-05.1803. As his fingers closed around the vial, the door slammed shut behind him. The temperature plunged, and his breath fogged in the beam of his flashlight. The growl returned, resonating through the cold metal walls. Clutching the vial, Allen realized the hospital had tried to trap him with his own history, and now the hunt had truly begun. That night, sleep fled Allen as if fearing what his mind might conjure. Each time he closed his eyes, the world of reality dissolved into torrential rain and fractured whispers. In his dreams, he stood alone in the ruined Watterson foyer, the candlelight sputtering to reveal a dozen shadow children, each clutching a torn corner of the photo album. Their hollow eyes bore into him, their lips moving in silent pleas. Find us. Find us. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the long corridor, and Allen sprinted past doors hung ajar, behind which he heard his own name echo in a chorus of distorted voices. Alan! Alan! They called from every corner, a fractal of urgency that pressed against his temples like a vice. He turned a corner and found himself face to face with the mother from the photograph. Her smile stretched impossibly wide, eyes hollow sockets dripping black tears. She extended a hand, bone white and glistening, beckoning him closer as the walls oozed with rainwater and something darker, something that looked like blood. Allen recoiled, heart hammering, but the dream snapped him forward, forcing him into the next scene. A sterile white room lined with metal tables, each bearing a small, wailing infant swaddled in shimmering silver cloth. The infant's cries merged into a single dissonant wail that reverberated through his bones. As he backed away, the strange symbol from the hospital records, circle bisected by a jagged line, marred the floor beneath his feet, glowing faintly like embers in the gloom. Suddenly, the ground gave way, and Alan plummeted into darkness. He landed on rough earth, breathless, twisting to see where he was, and recognized the overgrown courtyard of the mansion. The wick of the lone candle flickered in the distance. Drawn toward it, he stumbled over tangled roots and broken stone until he reached the chest in the master bedroom. But this time the chest was open, empty except for a single, dripping footprint that vanished into the darkness. A whisper curled around his ear, a voice both maternal and monstrous, hissing, "They took them all but you." The final word trailed into silence as the candle exploded in light, shattering the dream. Alan bolted upright in his bed, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. The rain thundered against his window pane, and in the heavy quiet that followed, he could still hear that voice echoing through his mind. But you... At dawn's pale light, Alan arrived at the gates of Elmore's decommissioned genetics facility, its chain-link fence sagging under rust and neglect. Beyond, the low roar of abandoned machinery echoed through cracked windows, and a single faded sign warned, "Authorized personnel only," as though anyone had been here in years. He scaled the fence with practiced agility, album and vial secured in his backpack, and slipped inside, boots crunching on shattered glass. The main corridor stretched before him, sterile once, but now plastered with peeling biohazard stickers and yellowed hazard tape. He shone his flashlight on a heavy metal door marked Lab Delta, the very site noted in the hospital margins. The lock was broken, the latch hanging loose. Pushing the door open, he stepped into a cavernous room of long stainless steel benches and overturned microscopes, their lenses cloudy with dust. Above each station, nameplates glinted. Dr. Whitaker, Dr. Santos, Lab Technician Marlowe. Names he would later learn belonged to the scientists who vanished after the facility's clandestine shutdown. Alan skirted rows of shattered petri dishes, pausing only to note chemical symbols scribbled on tabletops in faded marker. He followed a trail of dark stains, dried amber fluid that led him to a battered filing cabinet labeled Confidential Experimental Infants. Heart pounding, he opened the top drawer and found a stack of manila folders, each stamped with the same enigmatic symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged line. The first folder bore his name, Watterson Allen, Cohort 03AW. Night had fallen again by the time Alan found the overgrown path leading to the derelict estate on the outskirts of Elmore. Its iron gates hung ajar, rusted into grotesque shapes that resembled skeletal hands. Creeping ivy wove through broken window panes, and the moonlight slipped through the gaps like cold breath. Clutching the dossier tight, Alan stepped inside, every nerve alight with dread. He followed the faint glow of a lantern sliding behind frosted glass in the west wing. The floorboards groaned beneath him, and each footstep kicked up motes that shimmered in the sickly yellow light. At the end of the hall, a door stood half open, revealing a room where the walls were lined with tiny wooden cradles, each cradle empty except for a single moth-eaten teddy bear. Their glass eyes reflected Alan's flashlight beam like accusatory witnesses. A soft humming drifted from the corner where a rocking chair faced away from him. As he approached, the floorboards shifted, and he stumbled over a discarded medical tray strewn with rusted tools and broken vials. The chair's occupant rose in one fluid motion, a gaunt figure wearing a tattered lab coat stained with ancient mildew. In the dim glow, Alan recognized the caretaker's face, hollowed cheeks and sunken eyes, the same visage that had stared back at him in his nightmares. "You've come," the caretaker croaked, voice rasping like wind through dead leaves. He held out a skeletal hand, its fingers curled around a single photograph, another image of Alan as a newborn, this time swaddled in silver cloth and laid upon a stainless steel slab. "They left us to die, you know," he whispered, eyes flickering with sorrow. "Whitaker and Santos abandoned their prototypes and fled when the council discovered the failures." Alan's blood ran cold. What are you?" he stammered. The caretaker's lips twisted into a brittle smile. "I am what remains," he said, gesturing to the empty cradles. "We were the first. Experimental children who never grew beyond infancy. They—" He glanced toward the door, as if expecting someone else. "Took us here to watch over the others, but we were forgotten." The humming swelled, and Alan realized it wasn't mechanical. It was dozens of tiny voices, a chorus of children chanting in unison from beyond the walls. He peered at the peeling wallpaper, where the sound seemed to seep through. The caretaker reached into his coat and pressed a small, cylindrical device into Alan's palm. "You carry their essence," he murmured. "Return this to where it belongs, or their cries will never cease." Alan looked down to see the device glowing faintly with pulsating light, the same enigmatic symbol etched along its surface. The teddy bear's glass eyes glinted, and the soft voices around him rose to a mournful crescendo. Fear coiled in his gut, but beneath it, something resolute took hold. He nodded once, sharply, and turned to leave, the caretaker's hollow gaze following him until the door slammed shut behind him. Rain battered the estate as Alan fled into the night, the device burning cold against his palm and the echoes of lost children urging him onward. Alan's breath came in ragged gasps as he climbed the slick embankment back toward the Watterson mansion, the mysterious device burning icy against his palm. Moonlight painted the peeling facade in ghostly white, and the front door yawned open, a silent invitation. He crossed the threshold, guided by the faint hum of the device, and descended the grand staircase into the bowels of the house where it all began. Every step echoed like a tolling bell, and the air smelled of damp decay and ancient regret. At the bottom of the stairs, he found the master bedroom exactly as he had left it. The candle holder shattered on the floor, shards of wax frozen in mid-drip. The chest lay open, empty, inviting him to place the device on its worn lid. Heart pounding, he set the cylinder down. The humming reached a fever pitch, then stilled. Suddenly, the walls shuddered as hidden panels slid open, revealing dozens of small alcoves carved into the plaster, each containing a faded photograph of Alan at different stages of infancy, even before the first photo album image. A voice, calm and clinical, echoed around the room. "Subject 03-AW, activation complete." The device cracked open at his feet, spilling a fine, luminescent powder that drifted upward like snowfall in reverse. The powder coalesced into a shape, a child no more than a toddler, face tilted curiously as though examining Alan. But as the shape solidified, its features twisted into a grin that stretched impossibly wide, eyes shining with unnatural intelligence. Alan staggered back as the apparition spoke in a tone both childish and ancient. "You sought your parents, but they never existed. You were never born. You were built." The child's form flickered, revealing a lattice of wires and glowing circuits under translucent skin. "Whitaker and Santos created you to unlock human potential, an experiment in immortality and control. Your parents were programs, your childhood a simulation." The room grew colder. Behind him, the alcove's photographs fluttered to the floor like falling leaves, each one tearing itself, revealing behind it a small metal plate engraved with the same symbol. "We were their first failures," the child continued softly. "You are their greatest success." The apparition hovered closer, its smile widening until it filled Alan's vision. "And now, you must assume your role." Alan shook his head, numb with disbelief. The child's laughter echoed off the walls as the alcove sealed, trapping him in a cocoon of synthetic light. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was the candle holder relighting itself. The flame blue and steady, illuminating the symbol on the device one final time. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean in an otherworldly stillness. Alan awoke on the cold hardwood floor of the master bedroom, the scent of rain lingering in the air. His head throbbed, and he felt the weight of new knowledge pressing against his mind like a hidden vice. The candle holder lay intact as though nothing had happened, though the polished brass now bore an intricate engraving of the jagged symbol. He rose unsteadily, every muscle protesting, and crossed the room to the tall window overlooking the estate's overgrown grounds. Moonlight trickled through the broken panes, illuminating swirling motes that danced like restless spirits. Somewhere in the distance, a soft melody began, a lullaby, familiar yet distorted, as if played through warped speakers. The tune tugged at his heart, a haunting refrain that wove memories of a life he never truly lived. Alan pressed his hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his engineered heart beneath his ribs. He thought of the countless infants who had come before him, failures abandoned in the dark, and of the child apparition that claimed him as its final successor. A profound loneliness settled around him, deeper than any fear. Yet within that void flickered a fragile ember of resolve. He was more than an experiment. He was a being with questions, with choices. The lullaby swelled, and Alan turned away from the window, stepping toward the open doorway as the melody whispered through the halls. He clutched the photo album to his chest, a talisman of lies and longing, and walked into the corridor, the candle's flame lighting his path. Behind him, the music faded, but one final whisper trailed in the darkness. "Find us. Find us." And with that echo lingering in his mind, Alan embraced the unknown road ahead, determined to uncover the truth of the children who came before, and to write his own ending to their song. End of The Vanished Parents of Alan.